The sun rose over the rocky plateau, spilling golden light across sharp stones and small patches of dry grass. A tiny dragon hatchling sat curled up on a flat rock, its little claws clutching something fragile. It was a toy plane, broken and scratched, with one wing bent awkwardly. The hatchling stared at it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. No one had seen it smile except when it was near that broken plane. The hatchling's scales glimmered in the sunlight, orange and gold like a tiny flame. Its eyes were wide and round, filled with a mix of fear and sadness. It had been alone for days, maybe weeks. Its mother had gone to hunt far away, leaving it behind. Other dragons from the plateau flew overhead, loud and fierce, but they never came close. The hatchling huddled tighter around its toy whenever someone moved near. The toy plane was old and broken. The paint was scratched and one wing hung by a thread. But to the hatchling it was perfect. It reminded it of happier times, of a soft, warm nest and the gentle nuzzles of its mother. Now it was all alone. Every day, it would drag the plane across the rocks, guard it from other creatures and watch the horizon for its mother. A small breeze blew across the plateau, carrying the smell of dry stones and distant flowers. The hatchling's ears twitched. It had learned to be careful. Shadows moved, wind shifted, and every sound could be danger. Once, a hawk-like alien creature had tried to snatch the plane. The hatchling had let out a tiny roar, flaring sparks from its nostrils, and the creature had flown away. After that, the hatchling was even more protective. No one could touch its plane. It wasn't just a toy. The hatchling understood in its own small way that this plane carried memories. Memories of laughter and warmth. Memories of flying together in safe skies. Memories of being loved. And it would never let anyone take that away. The plateau was quiet now except for the soft wind. The hatchling nudged its plane with its nose, watching it wobble on the uneven rocks. It tilted its head, considering how it might fix the wing if only it had the right tools. It had tried stacking stones, using sticks, even rubbing the broken wing against smooth rocks, but nothing worked. The plane was still broken, and the hatchling sighed, a small, pitiful puff of smoke rising from its nostrils. Time passed slowly. The suns moved across the sky, casting long shadows that stretched over the plateau. The hatchling's stomach rumbled, but it didn't want to leave its toy to search for food. It was stubborn like its mother had been. It knew it had to survive, but it couldn't imagine being happy without the plane by its side. From afar, a shadow appeared on the edge of the plateau. The hatchling froze. Its wings, too small for flight, twitched nervously. It didn't recognize the figure. The figure walked closer, careful, slow and gentle. It wasn't a dragon. It was something else. A human. The hatchling's eyes narrowed. It had never seen a human before. Humans were supposed to be clever and strong, but they were also dangerous. It had heard stories from older dragons. Humans could take things, break things, even hurt dragons without thought. The hatchling curled itself tighter around the plane, growling softly. The human stopped at a distance and knelt down. The hatchling saw their hands, careful and open, not reaching for the toy. The human had tools, small and strange, that glinted in the sun. The hatchling tilted its head, curious but cautious. It sniffed the air, sparks flickering lightly from its nostrils. The human didn't move closer. Instead, they began to clean the rocks around them, making a small space. The hatchling watched, fascinated. No one had ever cared about it like this before. No one had ever made a safe place just for it to watch. It didn't understand why the human was being so gentle, but a small part of the hatchling wanted to trust them. Minutes passed. The human took something out of their bag, a piece of metal, smooth and shiny. The hatchling's claws twitched nervously. It didn't know what this was, but it wanted to protect its plane. It would let nothing touch it. Not yet. The wind picked up, ruffling the hatchling's scales. The sun dipped lower, turning the rocks orange and pink. The hatchling nudged its plane again, staring at the human. There was something different about this visitor. Maybe, just maybe, it could help. For the first time in days, the hatchling allowed itself a small flicker of hope. It stayed close to its broken plane, watching, waiting, unsure if it should trust. But deep down, it wondered if this human could be different. Perhaps the lonely days on the plateau were about to change. The human stepped carefully over the uneven rocks, keeping their eyes on the tiny dragon hatchling. Their name was Elias, and they had traveled across the stars to study dragons on this distant planet. Elias had heard about the hatchlings on the plateau, small dragons with bright scales and clever minds, but they had never expected to find one guarding a broken toy plane. The hatchling stiffened as Elias moved closer. Its wings, still too small to fly, twitched nervously. Sparks flickered from its nostrils, small but bright against the warm sunlight. The broken plane rested tightly in its claws, the bent wing hanging awkwardly. No human had ever come near it without trying to take it, and the hatchling was ready to protect its toy at all costs. Elias stopped a few meters away and knelt down, keeping their body low to seem less threatening. They carefully laid their bag on the ground and opened it slowly. Inside were small tools, pieces of metal, and parts that glimmered under the suns. Elias didn't move closer yet. They wanted to show the hatchling they meant no harm. The hatchling hissed softly but didn't attack. It had never seen a human so still and gentle. Its eyes, wide and round, followed every movement. Sparks danced lightly as it exhaled, testing the human's patience. Elias stayed calm, moving slowly, talking softly in a strange, soothing language. The sound was different but not scary. The hatchling tilted its head. Elias noticed the plane immediately. It was old and broken, one wing bent and paint scratched. They could see why the hatchling loved it so much. It wasn't just a toy, it was a treasure. Elias smiled under their helmet, careful not to make sudden movements. They pulled out a small piece of smooth metal and a tiny tool, setting them gently on a flat rock near the hatchling. The hatchling growled softly, still clutching the plane. It flared sparks to warn the human to stay away. But Elias didn't flinch. Instead, they held out one hand, palm up, showing nothing but peace. They didn't reach for the toy or try to touch the dragon. They just stayed still, waiting, letting the hatchling see they were different. Time passed slowly. The wind blew across the plateau, and the hatchling watched Elias carefully. Curiosity began to grow. No human had ever stayed so calm in its presence. No human had ever acted like they wanted to help, not hurt. The hatchling nudged the plane with its nose, then looked at Elias again, sparks flickering softly. Elias spoke again, gently, pointing to the broken wing. They made soft clicking sounds and small gestures with their hands, showing the hatchling they wanted to fix the plane. The hatchling's claws tightened around the toy. It didn't trust completely, but a small part of it wondered if the human could really help. Finally, Elias picked up the broken plane carefully, holding it just in front of them. The hatchling flinched, ready to snatch it back, but Elias didn't move too close. They examined the wing, tapping it lightly with a tiny metal tool, showing the hatchling they were gentle. Slowly, curiosity began to outweigh fear. The hatchling's tail flicked nervously, but it stayed close. Elias took a small piece of metal and a strange glowing strip from their bag. They attached it carefully to the plane, showing the hatchling how the wings could be repaired and even stronger than before. The hatchling's eyes widened. It didn't understand the human's tools, but it understood the result. Its plane could fly again. A shadow moved across the plateau, a small hawk-like alien gliding overhead. The hatchling growled and crouched, ready to protect the plane. Elias didn't flinch. They simply waited, watching the shadow pass, letting the hatchling see they could handle danger too. The tiny dragon's sparks dimmed as the creature disappeared, and it tilted its head to look at Elias again. The suns dipped lower, turning the rocks golden and pink. Elias finished attaching the glowing wings to the toy plane. They held it out carefully, letting the hatchling see the transformation. The wings unfolded slowly, shimmering in the sunlight. The hatchling chirped, a small happy sound, and nudged the plane gently. It didn't grab it. It didn't roar. It simply watched, fascinated and excited. For the first time since it had been alone, the hatchling felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps this human could be trusted. Perhaps this human could help bring a little happiness back into its lonely life. The hatchling stayed close, watching Elias work with careful hands, small gestures of care, and a quiet, patient heart. Elias smiled and sat back, letting the hatchling explore. The hatchling poked the repaired wing with its claw and chirped again. Sparks flickered from its nostrils in excitement. It still held the plane tightly, but it was no longer afraid. Something had changed. The human wasn't a threat. The human was a helper. As the sun sank lower in the sky, the hatchling curled up next to Elias, keeping one claw on the toy plane. The plateau was quiet but not empty. Something new had begun, a fragile bond between a lonely dragon and a kind human. The hatchling didn't know yet what the future would bring, but for now it felt safe. For the first time in many days, the hatchling wasn't alone. And the broken plane, once a symbol of loss, now held the promise of something more. Something bright. Something alive. The hatchling stayed close to Elias, its small body tense but curious. The repaired plane sat between them, its shiny new wings glimmering in the sunlight. The hatchling sniffed it, nudging it lightly with its nose. Sparks flickered softly from its nostrils, not fear this time but excitement. It had never seen the toy move so gracefully before. Elias smiled gently, careful not to startle the little dragon. See? It can fly again, they said softly. The hatchling tilted its head, not fully understanding the words, but the tone was comforting. Elias' voice was calm and warm, not harsh or demanding. It made the hatchling feel safer than it had in days. The hatchling tapped the plane with its claw. It wobbled, then balanced perfectly. Elias reached out slowly, holding their hand just above the toy without touching it. The gesture was careful, patient, and it spoke more than words ever could. The hatchling's tail flicked nervously, but it didn't pull away. For hours they sat like that. The hatchling would nudge the plane, then look at Elias. Elias would smile, make soft noises, and adjust the wings slightly, showing the hatchling how clever the machine could be. Every now and then, the hatchling would hiss or flare a little spark, testing Elias' patience. And every time, Elias remained calm, gentle, and steady. The plateau was quiet except for the wind and the distant calls of larger dragons overhead. The hatchling began to explore slowly, circling the human and the toy plane. It sniffed Elias' hand, touched the bag of tools, and even tapped one of the small metal pieces with its nose. Elias didn't react with alarm. Instead, they nodded and smiled, letting the hatchling know it could explore safely. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting warm light across the plateau. The hatchling chirped softly and nudged the plane again. Elias reached out and lightly touched the plane's wing, showing how it could move smoothly. The hatchling watched carefully, sparks flickering gently from its nostrils. It was learning. And more importantly, it was beginning to trust. Elias noticed a small tear on the plane's paint, near the tail. They picked up a tiny brush from their bag and began to fix it slowly, patiently. The hatchling watched every movement, fascinated. It didn't move its claws away from the toy. Instead, it leaned closer, following the human's careful work with wide, curious eyes. By now, the hatchling's trust was growing. It moved its little head closer to Elias, sniffing their hands and face. It chirped a small, happy sound, and sparks danced around its nostrils, not in anger but in excitement. Elias laughed softly. "You like it, don't you?" they said. The hatchling didn't answer with words, but the little tilt of its head and the soft tap of its claws on the plane said enough. Time passed quickly. The suns moved across the sky, painting the plateau in shades of gold and orange. The hatchling began to relax more, curling up near Elias as they worked on the toy. It still held the plane close, but it no longer hissed or flared sparks at every movement. A fragile bond was forming, one built on patience, care, and understanding. Suddenly, a shadow passed overhead. The hatchling froze and flared sparks, but Elias held up a hand gently. The shadow was just a flying creature circling high above. The hatchling watched as it passed without danger, then turned back to Elias and the plane. It chirped softly, almost as if thanking the human for keeping it safe. Elias finished the small repairs, stepping back to let the hatchling inspect the plane. The wings glimmered in the sunlight, and the hatchling nudged it gently. It pushed the plane forward and it glided across the rocks, balanced perfectly. The hatchling's eyes widened in delight. Sparks flickered joyfully from its nostrils as it nudged the plane again and again, testing its new wings. Elias laughed softly, watching the hatchling's excitement. "You see? It's all yours again," they said. The hatchling chirped, circling the plane and nudging it with its nose. It stayed close to Elias, brushing against their hand with its small body. A tiny, cautious trust had grown into something more, a bond. The plateau was quiet now, peaceful. The hatchling curled up beside Elias, one claw resting on the toy plane. It chirped softly, eyes half closed, sparks flickering gently. For the first time in many days it didn't feel lonely. It had someone it could trust. Someone who understood the value of its broken toy and cared enough to give it wings again. Elias reached out and gently stroked the hatchling's back, careful not to startle it. The little dragon shivered slightly, but it didn't move away. Instead, it pressed closer to the human, the bond growing stronger with every gentle touch. The broken plane, once a symbol of loss, had become a bridge, connecting a lonely hatchling to a kind human who had shown patience, care, and understanding. As the sun set behind the plateau, casting warm light across the rocks, the hatchling chirped one last time for the day. Sparks flickered softly, fading into the gentle glow of twilight. Elias smiled and packed up their tools, careful to leave the little dragon and its plane undisturbed. The hatchling curled up with the plane finally relaxed. It wasn't just a toy anymore. It was a promise. A promise that the world could be kind, that humans could be friends, and that even the smallest dragon, alone on a rocky plateau, could find trust, hope, and a fragile bond that might just last forever. The next morning the hatchling woke to the golden light of the twin suns spilling over the rocky plateau. Its little wings twitched nervously, but it didn't leave the plane. The repaired toy sat on the smooth rock, its shiny wings glimmering. The hatchling's claws rested on it as if it were guarding the most precious treasure in the world. Elias arrived quietly, carrying a small box of tools and a glowing metal strip. They had spent the night thinking about how to make the plane even better. The hatchling watched from a distance, its sparks flickering nervously. Trust had grown, but it was still cautious. The little dragon had learned that patience was key, both for itself and for humans. Elias knelt down, careful not to make sudden movements. They pulled out the glowing metal strip and attached it to the plane's wings. The wings hummed softly, a gentle vibration that made the hatchling tilt its head. Sparks flickered from its nostrils in curiosity. Elias adjusted the small metal pieces, tightening them just enough so the wings could move freely but stay strong. The hatchling edged closer, its eyes wide and cautious. Elias spoke softly, using gentle hand gestures and small clicks to show the hatchling that everything was safe. The little dragon sniffed the wings, poking them with a claw. They moved smoothly, glowing faintly in the sunlight. The hatchling's tail flicked with excitement. It chirped a tiny happy sound, letting out a small puff of smoke. Elias smiled. "Do you want to try?" they asked gently. The hatchling blinked. It didn't understand the words, but it understood the tone. Elias' calm, patient voice told it that something wonderful was about to happen. The little dragon nudged the plane with its nose, then stepped back. Sparks danced faintly as it watched Elias carefully. The human tapped the wings lightly, showing the hatchling how they could open and close. The plane stretched its wings fully, catching the sunlight. They glowed brightly, almost like tiny flames. The hatchling's eyes widened in amazement. It chirped, flapping its own small wings in excitement. Its tail lashed happily across the rocks. Elias took a small stick and pushed the plane gently forward. The wings caught the wind and the toy slid across the rocks, balanced perfectly. The hatchling chirped again, sparks flickering more brightly this time. It nudged the plane with its nose, then pushed it with its claws. It was learning. It was playing. It was happy. The plateau was alive with movement. The hatchling darted around Elias, nudging the plane and chirping excitedly. His trust had grown completely. For the first time, it let the human be part of its world. Every adjustment Elias made to the wings was met with soft chirps and tiny puffs of smoke. The bond between human and dragon had grown stronger than either could have imagined. Suddenly, a strong breeze swept across the plateau. The toy plane wobbled, then lifted slightly, its wings catching the wind. The hatchling chirped louder, its eyes wide with excitement and wonder. Sparks danced from its nostrils, bright and playful. Elias held out a hand, steadying the plane, but letting it feel the lift of the wind. The hatchling nudged it again, then tapped the wings with a claw. The plane lifted higher, gliding perfectly. The hatchling flapped its own tiny wings, trying to follow. Could only jump and glide a little, but it chirped with joy. The toy plane soared across the rocks, shining in the sunlight. The hatchling followed it with careful steps, never leaving it alone. Its tail lashed happily and sparks flickered like tiny fireworks. Elias laughed softly, watching the hatchling's excitement. "You did it," they said gently. The hatchling chirped again, pressing close to Elias and nudging the plane. It wasn't just a toy anymore. It was alive. It could fly. It could move freely across the plateau, just like its little dragon heart wanted. Hours passed. The hatchling played with the plane, gliding it across smooth rocks and through little patches of grass. Elias stayed nearby, adjusting the wings when needed, but mostly just watching. The little dragon had learned something important. Humans could be friends. Humans could be careful, clever, and kind. Humans could help dreams take flight, even for a tiny dragon with a broken toy. As the suns began to set, the hatchling curled up beside the plane, its little claws resting gently on it. Sparks flickered faintly, fading as the light dimmed. Elias smiled and sat back, watching the hatchling relax. The bond between them had grown strong. The toy plane, once broken and useless, was now a symbol of hope, trust, and new beginnings. The hatchling chirped one last time for the day, nudging the plane gently. Sparks danced faintly, as if the little dragon was celebrating its victory. The plateau was quiet but no longer lonely. A new story had begun, a story of friendship, trust, and the magic that happens when patience and care meet courage and hope. The broken plane had wings again, and the hatchling had a new friend. The next morning the plateau was calm and bright. The twin suns shone over the rocks, casting soft golden light across the little dragon hatchling and its repaired plane. The hatchling stretched its tiny wings, letting out a happy chirp. Its eyes sparkled with excitement and trust. The broken toy plane, once bent and useless, now sat proudly beside it, wings fully spread and shining in the sunlight. Elias arrived quietly, carrying a small pack of tools and food. They had spent the night thinking about the hatchling and its plane. The little dragon watched them carefully, sparks flickering faintly from its nostrils, but this time with curiosity and trust instead of fear. It had learned that Elias was kind, patient, and clever, a friend, not a threat. Elias knelt down on the smooth rocks and smiled. "Good morning," they said softly. The hatchling chirped back, its little body relaxed. It nudged the plane, testing its wings once more. They fluttered perfectly, catching the morning breeze. The hatchling hopped around, its tail flicking with joy. The plateau was alive with movement now. Small creatures peeked from behind rocks, watching the hatchling and its new companion. Even the larger dragons in the distance seemed calmer, circling silently without daring to approach. The hatchling had learned courage and trust in the past few days, and it carried itself differently now, confident yet gentle. Elias offered the hatchling a small piece of food. The little dragon sniffed it, then took it carefully with its claws. Sparks danced faintly as it chewed happily. Elias watched, pleased. They knew that trust was not just about toys or play, but about care, safety, and understanding. The hatchling had learned to trust humans, and that was something no one could take away. The toy plane glimmered in the sunlight. The hatchling nudged it again and chirped, pushing it forward. The wings caught the wind, and it glided smoothly across the rocks. The hatchling ran alongside, flapping its small wings, following every move. Elias watched silently, letting the little dragon enjoy its freedom. The plane was more than just a toy now, it was a symbol of hope, patience, and the bond they shared. As the day passed, Elias and the hatchling explored the plateau together. The little dragon showed off its agility, jumping from rocks and gliding short distances. Elias followed, careful not to disturb it, offering gentle guidance when needed. They moved as a team, learning from each other, respecting each other's space, and sharing quiet moments of joy. By evening, the suns began to set, painting the sky with shades of pink, orange, and purple. The hatchling curled up next to the plane, its small body warm and relaxed. Sparks flickered gently from its nostrils as it chirped softly, as if singing a song of happiness and trust. Elias knelt beside it, resting a hand lightly on its back. The hatchling leaned into the touch, finally accepting the human as a true friend. The wind carried soft whispers across the plateau. The hatchling's wings twitched, ready for another flight, but it stayed close to Elias. The toy plane, its wings fully functional, gleamed in the twilight. It had gone from being broken and useless to flying beautifully, thanks to human ingenuity, patience, and care. And just like the plane, the hatchling's heart had been mended. Elias looked at the little dragon and smiled. "We've done well, haven't we?" they said softly. The hatchling chirped again, sparks dancing happily, answering in its own way. It had found a friend, a protector, and someone who understood the importance of trust and care. The broken toy plane had become a bridge between two worlds, a human and a dragon. Night fell slowly, and the stars began to shine over the plateau. The hatchling curled up with the plane, feeling safe and content for the first time in many days. Elias packed up their tools but stayed close, ready to help if needed. The bond they had built was strong and steady, built on patience, care, and gentle understanding. As the twin moons rose in the sky, casting silver light across the rocks, the hatchling's eyes closed slowly. Sparks flickered softly, fading into the calm night. It dreamed of flying high, gliding with its repaired plane, and exploring new skies with its human friend by its side. Elias watched quietly, knowing this was just the beginning of their adventures together. The broken toy plane had wings again. The hatchling had a friend. And on that quiet plateau under the twin moons, a new beginning had started, a beginning full of hope, trust, and the promise of countless adventures yet to come. The little dragon's lonely days were over. It had found friendship, safety, and the joy of flight again. And somewhere deep inside, it knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, it would never have to face them alone.